which perhaps brings us to Operation Black Antler, which appeared at the Brighton Festival in 2016. And then you were telling me earlier that you've taken it elsewhere as well, to Chatham. So quite a different piece, although it still relies on some mobile communication. Tell us about Operation Black Antler.
Yeah, it's a collaboration with Hydrocracker, a Brighton-based theatre company led by Jem Wall and Richard Harlow, who make site-specific work. Richard and Jem are both highly distinguished actors in their own right. So Operation Black Antler really has a strong sort of theatre quality to it as a piece of work. The piece of work begins when you book and give your mobile phone number, and you then receive text messages about the operation that lead you ultimately to an anonymous door in the city, and when you knock on that door, a police officer opens it and ushers you inside to the fevered preparations for an undercover operation that the officers are going to be conducting in the next hour at a nearby pub. As part of the briefing, you meet your fellow members of your team and build your own legend, your cover story. You learn a little bit about the far-right group who you are going to infiltrate, called National Resistance, and it happens at fairly high pace, so that before long you're back on the street walking towards this pub with only the thinnest idea of what exactly you're going to do. Within a minute or two you arrive at that pub and go inside. As you come through the door, it looks like an absolutely conventional pub with a crowd of people inside. A community event is going on for a local girl called Rachel who's planning to join the army. A band are playing to help raise money for her. But you're aware that inside are a number of members of this far-right group, and you in particular have one of them as your person of interest who you are trying to find and make contact with, build trust with, as a way of understanding what they're doing and what the limits of national resistance are. And through that process, you may build enough trust with them that you even meet some of the leaders of this group. And the piece culminates with you back on the street, where you meet a plainclothes officer who then asks you to make a decision about whether intrusive round-the-clock surveillance is warranted in this case.
So there's quite a lot of setup. It's obviously a fictional setup. To what extent did you find that people were willing to role-play? Because in effect you're asking people to role-play. And I mean, actually, I think having done the piece, I think what all of that setup does is put people in a place where they find themselves, certainly I've felt this myself, you know, confronting how you operate in perhaps those sort of situations, and perhaps actually what you believe in. So it's a challenge to your interior sense of self, but you have to choose to participate in the first place, I guess, and that's a threshold that some people find more difficult to cross than others, perhaps.
Yeah, in all of our works, we're always conscious to try and create a range of models of participation that suit a wide range of audiences. So it's really important that these aren't works for the loudest and most theatrical person in the room who will thrive at pretending to be someone else. And it's very intentional that in Operation Black Antler, despite the sort of high level of fiction that I've described in that setup, the reality of it is go and meet a stranger in a pub and start a conversation with them. It's also a very intentional part of the design that you work in a group of three, and that if one of you in the group of three feels bold enough to begin this conversation, the other two of you can go along with it. So it's not accidental that the work does actually allow you to be pretty much mute all the way through, if that's really what you felt was the only way in which you could participate. So it's about trying to create a very gentle on-ramp between your ordinary self, your everyday self, who has bought a ticket to an event and you're hoping you're going to have a good experience, through to being deeply engaged in quite a complex and challenging task, both representationally and politically, and that you can move for yourself to a position that feels comfortable and move in both directions at all stages. So you really can drop back off if you feel that this is now getting a little bit too intense and too exposing. And often what people start finding is that they rapidly get drawn towards very deep engagement, that they find that because it is a gradual process that feels more comfortable.
I think that might be one of the keys to the company's success, that there's room to participate fully, or to step back a little, to be more observant, to watch what other people do. So you feel as though you have quite a lot of room to manoeuvre as a participant. And there's the experience aspect of that, so putting people in a situation where they will then negotiate their own experience. And there's the theme, and the theme is very deliberately political, and I know that the company has, I suppose, put a lot of emphasis through the years on engaging with social and political themes. So that remains important, but with a small p, not a big P.
Yeah, I think it's you know, we're very conscious that that a really powerful artwork is something that reflects the complexity of the world, and it does not try and simplify that complexity in order to make a moral or political point. In this case, we're looking both at undercover policing and some of the really horrendous abuses that have been perpetrated by undercover police officers over the last 40 years in the UK, and at the rise of far-right politics and anti-immigrant sentiment, and where that comes from and who those people really are. And both of those are very edgy and live political subjects. There was a lot of criticism about Operation Black Antler when it was first announced as something that was not appropriate to play at being an undercover officer, and I can completely understand those concerns. But we're always interested to try and reflect our ambivalence politically, as well as making you know, a set of political claims in any way. So you know, the issue around surveillance is to do with the fact that in the UK we're relatively relaxed about surveillance compared to most countries on Earth. One Amnesty International poll suggests that only the Philippines and France are more relaxed about surveillance than the UK. So
I think we have more of it than anyone else as well, cameras per person.
Certainly in terms of CCTV and things like that, absolutely we do, yeah. So I'm interested in, you know, why are we relaxed about it? What is it about us as a country that means that we feel relatively comfortable about that? And to put you in a position where, rather than being invited to reflect upon it from a distance, you're inside a piece of work where you're making ethical decisions for yourself, and that leaves you with a whole set of different problems to ponder over after the work is finished, where you do have the opportunity to go to a sort of debrief space and talk with members of the company about the work as it finishes, because there are so many things to untangle about. Was I right to have professed anti-immigrant views to this person? Was I right to suggest that surveillance is warranted in this case?
I think that social unpacking at the end with the company was a very nice way of wrapping up the piece. So the work has these big themes and it gnaws upon some quite difficult issues. You started out by saying that the company was really interested to find a way of engaging with theatre and performance, perhaps, but certainly through performance, in a way that was different from what theatre appeared ordinarily to do. And what theatre ordinarily does is, arguably, is deliver stories through characters. So you've done away with actors, and you've kind of done away with stories, haven't you? Because a lot of these pieces, whilst they have a trajectory, they're also open-ended. So no narrative, no acting?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's absolutely true. I mean, Operation Black Antler is striking in that, you know, we've got some amazing actors.
There were a couple of actors there.
Yeah,
True enough, yes.
a fantastic company of professional actors. But yes, you know, I don't think, you know, I mean, I go back to Peter Brook. You know, reading his book *The Empty Space* was a kind of formative experience for me, because he talks about theatre in terms of its absolute essence, which is an audience member and a performer at a particular moment in time at a particular place. That is the, you know, the core, and I think that all four of those aspects of theatre are being reconfigured and challenged in new ways via technology in particular, but cultural change too. And so we're looking to stretch all four of those different elements in different ways in different projects.
And you mentioned Brook. Who else is, if we zoom out a bit, who else is important to the company, perhaps as by way of influence initially, but now who are your peers as well? Who else do you look at and get inspired by and feel that you're looking to see what they do next as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was hugely fascinated by Russian constructivist theatre, and through that route to Piscator and Brecht in terms of political theatre, in terms of the origins of making non-naturalistic theatre and thinking about the limits of what theatrical fiction could do. And I would then see a continuity that comes all the way through to someone like Augusto Boal and the theatre of the oppressed, the idea of giving the audience the opportunity to step into a piece of theatre and participate within it, and what the radical potential of that might be. In terms of peers, I mean, we look really widely. We're as likely to be looking at indie games makers as we are other theatre makers, but certainly companies like Rimini Protocol and Gob Squad, Invisible Flock, Non-01 are all companies that I would always go out of my way to try and see their work.
I suppose there won't be another Blast Theory, there probably shouldn't be, but if there's a company setting itself up who are inspired by your work, how do you see them developing over the next 25 years, and what would you advise them to look out for?
God, I suppose I think it's about creating sort of diversity at some level. It's about looking for different possibilities of kinds of experience, and I think if you can find some sort of way of creating a really distinctive experience for someone, that will always create you know, a strong trajectory for the route that you're embarking on as a company. I mean, that's sufficiently vague to be almost entirely useless, but I think that's what we've tried to do.
And the last question, it's an extraordinary achievement to hold together as a company for so long. Looking back at Matt Adams 25, 26 years ago, what advice would you give him?
Oh my God. I sort of feel it's useless. He would have paid no attention to the old man. So I think that's probably, you know, that's probably the right thing. I think, yeah, I mean, the greatest thing about theatre as an art form is that you can get up and do it really quickly. You know, lots of people who want to make films or television or whatever, they spend their entire lives struggling to get anywhere. With theatre, you have the raw materials right here and right now, and I think that thing of just being able to try something out and make work right now and keep making work is the core principle. Is what I say to every student: is do not wait for some fabled future moment at which you'll be starting to make the work you want to make. You must get straight at it, and you know, even if you're limited in terms of time and money and resources, there is a way that you can get something going.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.